Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Anisha from Oman Book Lovers Club. Thank you for joining in today for our very grand season finale of season 2, Voices of Women Live Chats at OBLC. An idea that just developed into this fabulous series. I cannot express my joy as I speak today. It has been an honor, a delightful experience to talk to each author, each one of them award winning, best selling, representing diversity in all possible ways, and from very diverse backgrounds from around the globe. Before we get started with our chat, I would like to take this opportunity to talk briefly about Oman Book Lovers Club. Founded for the sheer love for books and reading, to borrow, share, exchange books, and meet fellow book lovers, it has transitioned into so much more and created its own identity. The vision is to connect all book lovers in Oman, to make it one stop for all things books, all information on books and book lovers and reading. We have something for everyone. Connect with fellow book lovers and talk about your favorite books, share your books, and borrow from other members. Meet fellow book lovers through virtual meets for different genres. Read along book of the month followed by a book discussion. In Oman. It is a mammoth task to even count her many accomplishments. From being a pioneer in education, healthcare, counseling since her arrival in Oman in 1980, to being the proud recipient of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, MBE, granted by the Queen Elizabeth II. A strong advocate of children's rights, Jane set up the Let's Read program under the auspices of Lata in January 2007. The aim of the program is to promote the love of reading children in Oman. It also provides a platform for children's writings to be published by organizing an annual children's writing competition. Let's Read also runs a mobile bookshop called Maktabati and the popular bookshop in Oman Avenues Mall that also serves as a book donation venue. Jane JAFFER has written several books, including Women on the Edge, Dana and the Dolphin, Scent of a Rose, Memoirs of an Omani Gentleman from Zanzibar, Love in the Times of Zanzibar, Sariya and the Turtles, and Raifi's Amazing Dinosaur Adventure. Books for adults and kids alike. So let's bring Jane on.
Hello, Anisha.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are super thrilled.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's absolutely a great pleasure. You've really hit the ground running and you're doing great things with the Oman Book Lovers Club.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you, Jane. So let's get the ball rolling, and we can't wait to hear your story about your books, about your entire journey. So we would like to request to you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what all you have been, the different professions, and the person behind the author Jane and the pioneer of Let's Read Jane that we know.
Okay, well, where to start? I'm very old, so it's quite a long story. I suppose the first thing to say is that I grew up in London, in Blackheath, and became a primary school teacher there, and was, quite happily enjoying on my part of my career until I met a gentleman from Oman. And we fell in love. And so I moved here when we got married in 1980. So I've actually been in Oman for 41 years, which is a very long time. And of course, I've seen huge changes in, the infrastructure, hospitals and schools. And, it's changed beyond all recognition, really. And it's been a pleasure and a privilege to watch it grow and develop. So it's been great. And as I came here as a teacher, so I started off working in Williams Nursery. and then went on to open my own nursery school in '82. And first it was in Rui, and then I moved it to Purim 16, and then over to Medina Caboose. So for most of the '80s, I was running a nursery school, and in fact, at that time, I had two little boys. My first child was born just really as I'd registered the school. So Sammy came when he was very young to the school, and then my second child was born in 1984. I think he was 3 weeks when he first came to the nursery. So they both really were very involved, and a lot of their friends were coming to the school. And at that time, there was a lot of young children, I mean, young people with children here. And I think I had something like 120 on the waiting list at one point, with five staff and 40 children. So it was great fun. And then I was asked to set up the nursery at the British school, which was at that time called MES, Muscat English Speaking School, in MQ. And so I set that up, and I think I was just shown to stock rooms really, and told if I could make it into a nursery school. So that was quite a tall order, but I did enjoy getting back into mainstream teaching again.
Yeah.
And I stayed in that school for quite a while until the '90s, when I had my third child in '91, and the third boy. And so then I went on to supply and support teaching after that. But, one thing that I always felt was that reading is such a key to success, really, for children. I mean, if you can read well, you can pass your exams and get a better job. But you learn about the world, you develop your vocabulary so you can express yourself more clearly, so you build confidence in yourself. You learn about other people, and then you learn empathy because you try to put yourself in other people's shoes. And I
Yeah.
think that's a very important thing. A lot of people, when I go into schools and I ask children what's empathy, and they sometimes think I'm saying sympathy. But empathy is something completely different, because it's emotional intelligence, they say, is as important as any other kind of intelligence, in that being able to understand what other people are going through,
Yeah.
to empathize with their situation, take a walk in their shoes, which
Yeah.
we can do so readily when we read. It
Yeah.
really it is important. And you also learn about yourself, because you think, what would I do if I was in that situation? And then you learn so much from how people cope with awful things and overcome obstacles, and those. So I think reading is very important, and I felt that a lot of children in Oman don't perhaps get the opportunity, or at that time anyway, to read books about people who are like themselves. Books that are set in Oman, for example, books
Hmm.
where the children are like the children here. So I wanted to write children's stories that were set in Oman.
Hmm.
So that's one of the reasons why I got into writing, and
Wow.
also why I got into Let's Read.
Yeah. So we will talk at length about your writing journey. What inspired you to become author? I mean, like you just touched upon. We'll go much deeper into that aspect, because that's the whole 1 hour it's supposed to be about. But before we dive into it, how entire Oman resonates with the name Jane Jaffer. Let's spend a little time talking about the Let's Read campaign. Tell us about it, how the journey and what it's about, what it's focused. A little bit about Let's Read for people who are yet not aware.
Yes, well, Let's Read grew from, as I said, I felt that there wasn't enough access for children to access good books at reasonable prices. So we started doing book drives. That was the first thing. I remember I had a meeting, just a coffee with some friends at the Intercon in 2007. And I said, what can we do to get books to children, and to really encourage them to read, to give them good reading experiences? And so we came up with this idea of doing a book drive, and then doing a monthly book sale. So
Hmm.
that's how we started. We would collect books at schools, through women's groups, however. And then with the books that we managed to get donated, we would hold a monthly sale, sell the books for just 1 rial,
Hmm.
and I had a big bunch of, I mean, I think it was about 40 volunteers, which was wonderful. So every month we would be doing these sales. And then with the money that we raised, we would go and buy Arabic children's books in
Hmm.
Arabic, so that we could then take those into the interior, and we'd go sometimes in our, four-wheel drives, and we'd go all over the place to lots of different little villages. I've been to Jebel Akhdar, around, lots of different outlying areas.
Yeah.
And we'd go to schools, we'd go to nursery schools, sometimes we'd go to hospitals. And then we thought, well, some of the kids in hospitals, they haven't got much to do when they're in hospital. So we started doing playrooms in hospitals, and we got some artists to do sort of big murals on the walls, and then we put bookcases there and have lots of like literacy games and activities. And then we'd also, of course, have some volunteers who could go in and play with the children. And I remember some kids from Tazen, they helped us. We made some trolleys on wheels, so that we could even wheel those books around to the kids who couldn't get out of bed. And then, parents would then pick up the book and read to their kids at their bedside and things. So, there was some, it was fun. We really enjoyed ourselves. And then it got to the point where I thought, we got so many books, where are we going to keep all these books? We were selling them, but we really, people were saying, I've got, boxes full you can have. So we thought,
Yeah.
well, we need to open a shop. So actually, what we did was we bought a porter cabin, and the people from Public Knowledge Library very kindly let us put our porter cabin in their grounds, and we used it as a store for books, but we also started it as a kind of little shop. At the same time, the Women's Guild of Oman, which is a great organisation that's really
Yeah.
super for the trailing spouses, people who come to Oman and they don't know anyone. They have lots of different activities, coffee
Yeah.
morning, you know, great activities. And every year they would do fundraising activities. And one of the things they used to do was a crystal ball. And miss all those balls these days. But uh, Sally Sleep, who was president at the time, in about must have been about 2012, she said to me, "We've raised 23,000 riyals at the Crystal Ball, and we would
Wow.
like to give it to you to buy a bus." Because I was looking, how can I get the bus so that we can take a mobile library out on the road? And
Yeah.
so that was a funny journey. Actually, it was quite funny. I remember going down to the souk with Sally, and we bought, that lovely Arabic style material. We bought huge big bales of it, and we're walking through the souk with this over our shoulders, just like Buster Keaton with a ladder, virtually knocking everyone over with our bales of material, because we wanted to do a sort of a majlis on the bus. And we were very lucky because Sally's husband had actually designed the interior of the Orient Express. Imagine that. And he very kindly gave us his services to design the inside of the bus. So I took the bus down to Rui, could hardly find anywhere to park it. And this little carpentry workshop there ripped out the seats and built these wonderful sort of round carousel shop bookshelves and things, and the little majlis and the reception area and everything. So that was our first bus, and that was in 2013 that we actually launched the bus. And then we started the shop. So it all sort of, started from there. It kind of just, took off. It just blossomed, as you say.
Wow.
You know, it's the power of the individual to make a difference. I mean, it was a small little drop, but it becomes bigger as it sort of gains momentum, and more and more people got involved, and people have
Yeah.
been fantastic. They've helped so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Really. I mean, it's very inspiring and no words. In fact, I mean, um, all our members, I mean, Let's Read is the one-stop shop for most people. That's where they, they like, But the other thing is, apart from buying books, people like to just sit there and read and spend time, and I have done so myself. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, I definitely feel that it is a place where you can drop by and just come and have a chat, and like a community centre. That's
yes,
for sure that we wanted to
yeah,
create. And the great thing is that the books are only 1 and 2 reals, and
yeah,
books are expensive, and especially now when there's a lot of uncertainty, having COVID and the
yeah,
economy and all recession and everything. So people don't have a lot of money to spend on books. So it's nice that you can come there and find a book or just sit and read. You don't even have to buy it.
yeah, yeah. True, that's very true. In fact, all the activities, the events for kids that keep going on there, you're right in saying it is a community center more than just a bookshop, of course. At this point, before we go into the next questions, I'm just quickly going to take the audience comments. People who joined in from the beginning saying hello. So if you might like to say a hello back, I'm going to bring them on screen. Nuza there. I'm sure you both know each other well, saying hello. Yeah. Um, Vaibhavi says good evening. Good evening, Vaibhavi. Thank you for joining. Trupti, it's an honor to join this chat.
Yeah, lots of people that I know. That's great. Hi, hi everyone.
Rukia, the dreamer. Thank you so much, Rukia, for joining. Benazir, thank you for joining. Smriti, thank you so much. And that's the last one for now. Nusa says the bus in the library gives us the wonderful warm feelings only books and good company bring. Um, Tenny says, Let's Read is definitely a stop for my daughter at Avenues Mall.
Very
All
good.
right. Okay. Coming back to our conversation. So, to start with talking about your books, what kind of books do you write? If you could talk about the genre briefly, and then later on in the conversation, we will go deep into each book. But broadly, what kind of books do you like writing?
Well, I didn't write very much when I was younger, to be honest. I wrote some poetry. But Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, really got me writing because it's a book which helps people who've got some kind of creative block, either musical, artistic, or writing. And so there's lots of different exercises in the book. One of the things they suggest is that you go on an artist's date, and
Hmm.
that could be walking around a gallery or walking along by the seashore or walking in the forest. Something that inspires you, something that makes you feel, um, I often say writers, your eyes glaze over and you're sort of somewhere else. And it's like going into the zone. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it was nice to do that. But one of the other things they suggest is writing morning pages. So when you wake up before you get out of bed, you just take pen and paper and start writing. You don't read what you've written. You don't worry about anyone seeing it. No one's going to mark it. No one's going to check it. And it's like a stream of consciousness. And it becomes an excavation of the soul because you begin to learn a lot about yourself from doing it. And it's like anything else, it becomes cathartic. If you, it's like a healing process. In fact, writing can be absolutely a therapy, much as art can be, or anything else that's creative.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so basically, I started doing the morning pages, and before I knew it, I was writing 10 pages. And then before I started writing poetry, and people, if we had any event or activity, I'd write a poem about it. And so then I started writing poetry about women and the kind of experiences that women have. So that was the first book, that was a poetry book, but I've also written romantic thrillers, I've written historical fiction, and then um, three children's books, as you know, and then
Yeah.
and some memoirs because I'm very passionate about life stories.
Yeah. Wow. So, are your books based on real experiences? If you could share the inspiration behind your books.
Well, I mean, some of them, some of the poems, they have some, yeah, of course, because that's what sort of starts one thinking about what to write about. But not really. I mean, a lot of them are just, when you read a lot or when you, I mean, I'm a great observer of people. I mean, I can sit in an airport for hours just watching people thinking, who is that person? Where are they going? What's their relationship? And I can get really completely carried away in that because I'm a very character driven person, author, if you like, because I don't start with a plot and then get some characters around it. I'm much more a person who'll start with a character, building that character, and then, the idea is that you get to know them really, really well. And then you let that character kind of lead the way, really. So yes, that's I wouldn't say they're autobiographical, but I am actually writing. I'm writing a book called "Showing My Age," which is definitely showing my age, but it's looking at each decade of my era from the 50s all the way up to now. What happened in the world, and then what happened in my life as well in those decades. A decade per chapter, with lots of pictures, and of course that's also going into my history all the way back to sort of like the 18th century, because I did some
Mhm.
sort of family research into my family, and I did the DNA test as well. So that was
Wow,
interesting. Yeah.
very interesting. We're looking forward to that. So, while you briefly touched upon what I'm going to just ask in your previous answers, but um, you did start writing poems, like you said. But tell us about your journey of becoming an author, because writing for yourself, like you said, morning pages, is one thing. A lot of people may, but there's a turning point when you realize, okay, now I have achieved something and I would like to publish it. So, what made you venture on the path of writing to publish, basically? And if you'd also like to talk about the process of publishing, what the challenges faced, what does it take to be a published author? So,
Mhm. Well, I suppose the reason, because I'd written a lot of poems about female experiences from sort of birth to death, um, and everything in between about spirituality, emotional intellect, different experiences that women have. Um, I had got quite a lot of poems, and at the time, actually, my father was very ill, and he was given just 3 months to live. And I brought my dad here from London, and I thought it would be a really nice project if we worked on it, because my father was an artist. So I thought he could do the pictures and I could do the poems.
yeah.
And so I shared the poems with him, and he would start, doing these little sketches. He wasn't very well at the time, but he managed to do some really nice sketches. And yeah, so we published the book, and I was really thrilled that he was able to see my work, to see his own work published, which was great. He was also
So
on
fun.
the front page of the newspaper because at the time that was, the Iraq war was about to happen, and we were all protesting. And my dad did these women against war posters, and we all trudged around Shati al Quram, going to the American British embassies, saying that we didn't want the war. And my dad was there on the front page with a picture. He'd never been on the front page of a newspaper before.
Wow. Wow. What experiences and memories that. Okay. So, and you went on the self publishing path, is it?
So yeah, when I decided to publish that one, I thought, well, really, it's a self-publishing vanity post publishing, as they called it in those days. Although I
Hmm.
don't think they do call it that so much now, because actually, there's no person better to uh, publish the book than you yourself, because it's your book and you want it to do well, so you have to do that legwork. And the other thing is, if you do publish with a well-known, if you're lucky enough to get
Hmm.
published with a well-known publisher, they take an awful lot of the control away from you and also the money away from you, because we did publish one book here with a particular publishing house, and I think they took a huge amount of percentage of the sales money. And then another book, their publishing house wanted to do it, but they wanted to control the illustrations. They wanted someone else to do the illustrations. And I didn't want that because I suppose I knew what the book was, for me it was in my head was the visual characters. And so I didn't want someone else to have that control. So yeah, I mean, it's also, I'm one of those people, if I want to do it, I want to do it now or yesterday. And of course, if you wait, you have to send it off to a dozen publishers. One thing I did do, which was quite useful though, was the literary, what's it called? The literary, I can't remember the name of it now. It's a company in England, and basically what you do is you send them, first of all, they'll give you an appraisal. You pay a little bit, they give you an appraisal of your book. Then they put you together with a fairly well-known, or at least a successful author who's written a book in the genre that you're writing in. So I was put together with an author when I was doing my book, Love in the Time of Zanzibar. And so what happened was I would submit 2 or 3 chapters to her, and then she would look through it, and she wouldn't edit it. She wouldn't do a lot of the legwork. I had to do that, but she would advise me. I think, this is what you have to think of. For example, I remember one thing she said, which was very interesting. And she said, like in the, say in the 19th century, let's say Charles Dickens, the way he wrote was, it was his opinions through the narrator, and it was very much narrated by one person. But since sort of Freud and have changed it, you have to get into the head. In the 20th century, you have to get into the head of your character, and you have to talk as if you are that character. So things that if you're 8 years old, you have to talk like an 8-year-old. You can't, so that was interesting because I was writing about an 8-year-old at one point in that book. And so I had to reimagine it. I had to rewrite it, to be honest, to get that. And then the other thing is that in those days, with the sort of Charles Dickens age or whatever, it was all written. It was tell rather than show. Whereas now it's show, don't tell. I mean, that you have to get the audience want to get involved. The reader wants to get involved and work it out. You don't have to tell them everything, because it's like, some massive mystery that they should put all the bits together themselves. And it's like one of those pantomimes where, it's like, he's behind you kind of thing. And the reader or the audience knows more than the person who's in the book. And that's quite, there's a lot, people think actually it's easy writing for children. But it's not really, because what I had to do with my books was I wanted it to be read by a child, an early reader. So then you had to keep repeating, certain words and really restrict the vocabulary. And yet you want it still to be an exciting book, So yeah, I mean, there's different genres obviously have their different challenges.
Yeah, true. So, do you think any of the characters take after you, or any inspiration from people to you, or there's a mix of characteristics put together?
Well, when I wrote Scent of a Rose, that was my second book after a poetry book, and I was writing a sort of a romantic thriller, and I wanted it to be, well, I mean, if you want to be an author, you have to really know what you're writing about. That's why you usually have to go and research, you have to go, I don't know, travel to another country, whatever. So the thing is to write about what you know. And so I knew of the experience of coming from England and moving to Muscat. So that's why I set the book, starting in England, coming to Muscat. But the story itself was not anything to do with my story. I mean, she gets lost in the desert, and thankfully the Bedouin rescue her. Oops, I've just given you a anyway. But no, I think it's important that you know um, you do write about what you know. So therefore, there will be some parts of your own character coming through, personality coming through.
Yeah, yeah. So, in the chronological order, we've talking about books in a very scattered manner in all our previous
That's my
questions.
nature,
So,
unfortunately.
I mean, we have referred to different books as you talked about your writing and the journey. So, in chronological order, if we could go through each book, especially the ones authored by you, and focusing on the ones authored by you, include, if you could tell us about the inspiration. Like, for example, you spoke about Loving the Times of Zanzibar, but like the Rose book, we haven't talked much about. So, the backstory, the inspiration, and what the books are about briefly, uh, talking about the books that you authored.
Okay. Well, I started this one, as I say, in 2003. This is my book of poetry,
Yes.
with my father doing the pictures. So that was that one. And that was really, I enjoyed that because that was very much a cathartic experience for me. Then I set up a sort of writers group, really. I mean, I think the thing is in Oman, you have to set up your own support groups. You have
Yeah.
to find your own like-minded people.
Yeah.
So I started a writers group way back, and one of the pieces of homework we had to do was write a paragraph that would be the beginning of an exciting story. So I wrote about this girl, and she's walking home late at night in the dark in London, and there are footsteps behind. I mean, it's very classic, but
Mm.
it does create that kind of drama and that kind of suspense. And
Mm.
so after I started writing, I couldn't stop, and I gradually sort of developed her character, Rosie,
Mm.
and had her coming to Oman. So this was Scent of a Rose, and sent because, of course, she was being stalked, and her name is Rose. So that was that one, and that was my foray into sort of romantic thriller. Then, as I was getting at this point into sort of thinking more about children and children's literature, I decided to write Dana and the Dolphin. And one of the things that I wanted to do with that book was actually really engage young children in the writing process. So I went to the Sultan School and talked with the art teacher and the children in the art group room. And I said, look, I want to write this story and give me your opinion and what should happen now and how should this happen. So I got quite a lot of contribution and help from the children about, for example, are they walking under a mango tree? What time of the year is it? Kind of that kind of thing. So so then I actually got them to do the pictures as well. So the whole book has got some lovely pictures
Yeah.
uh,
Wow.
by children from the Sultan School. Um, it's cute little pictures. I don't know if you
Very
can see.
nice. Yeah.
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 So that was Down in the Dolphin. And when I go into schools, I read this one quite a lot because it's quite a sort of uh, a white knuckle kind of thing because she goes out, this little girl, Dana, goes out in a boat and she's actually rescued by a dolphin. So, you know, Oman has the most amazing dolphins in the waters around Oman. So I wanted it to be set in a small village, and I wanted the children's names to be Omani names. And when I go into schools and I say, oh, this little girl's name is Dana, and people say, oh, that's my name, and oh, I've got a brother called Ali. It's really nice because they can relate to it. So that's what I wrote down in the Dolphin. And then what did I do after that? Well, I was approached actually by a very, very wonderful gentleman who was nearly 100 actually. Um, and he he wanted to meet with me because he wanted me to write his memoirs. And so it was amazing. I sat with him, I think, every Wednesday morning for about a year. And
Wow.
yeah, we had, I learned so much about him, but about all sorts of things. And one of the main things I learned about was about Zanzibar's history, which is fascinating. And so, yes, one Saud Al Basaidi, he really gave me an education, I think. And I think it was very nice for him because I would give him these prompt questions and I'd be writing away. And then the next week I'd come back and he'd got an awful lot more to say because it had sort of jogged his memory about something that happened, 50, 60, 70 years before. So that was this book here. It's called Memoirs of an Omani Gentleman from Zanzibar.
Yes, from Zanzibar.
And
Yeah, I
his
remember.
sister was Saida Nunu. She was married to Sultan Khalifa the Great. Sultan Khalifa of Zanzibar.
Wow.
So that was fascinating. He ruled from sort of 1910 to 1960, I think it was. And
Hmm.
so Adwan Saud was district commissioner Stone Town in Zanzibar at one point. And so his story was fascinating, and he was very much there during the revolution.
Hmm.
And yeah, so it was a very very interesting. He gave a fly on the wall account. It was amazing. And I remember the funny thing was that apparently when he was in the revolution, he was in prison, and
Oh.
yeah, and the guard came to him because they treated him very well, but he was still in prison. And the guard said to him, "Sir, you haven't eaten your dinner." And he said, "Yes, well, that's because I may be shot in the morning." I mean, he was so sort of matter of fact about the whole thing. And he
Ah.
did actually escape eventually, and he travelled across from Egypt to through Libya. Sorry, travelled through Libya to Egypt.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, he had a very, very, no, that's wrong. He traveled from Egypt to Libya. And then, yeah, it was a very long and difficult life. And he had to completely reinvent himself from being, he entertained Princess Margaret on a state visit in the
Wow.
palace in Zanzibar. And then the next minute, he was working in a cigarette factory in Libya. I mean, just how do you change? How do you adapt? People are so amazing how they adapt. Now, in his house when he was growing up, when he was born in 1917, there was a helper, housemaid, living who had actually worked for Saida Salma. And that brings me on to the next book that I wrote because I was so enthralled by his story that it made me read this story
Ah,
again. And I had read her story before,
I have a copy too. Thanks to you.
but her story, I mean, she was the first Omani woman really to write her autobiography in 1888.
Hmm.
She was born in 1844 to Sultan Said the Great, who had started his rule here in Oman, in Beit al Falaj. He was here, I think, in the 1820s. But
Hmm.
he changed his base to Zanzibar.
Hmm.
So went from Beit al Falaj here to Beit Mutoni there, which also means the same thing, really, like house on the creek kind of thing. And fascinating life that she led, and her mother's life also, which I've written about. Her mother was actually stolen from her village in Circassia in probably we think about the 1830s. We don't know much about it because she only writes, very briefly about her mother. So again, when you write romantic fiction, historical fiction, you're imagining the dialogue, you're imagining the impact
Hmm.
of the events that we all know actually did happen, but we don't know how it affected that person, how they
Yeah.
coped with the difficulties that they faced. So I was kind of trying to bring that story because she wrote it in German, which was then translated into English. Hers is Memoirs of an Arabian princess. Um, and so that, I mean, that actually is out there. It actually exists. But I wanted to bring that story into the 20th century, 21st century, and you know, make it more a real character, if you like, because you know, it's just sort of about the dialogue and things. So yeah, that was that. And funnily enough, this picture,
Yeah.
this is my daughter-in-law.
Oh, wow, really?
Yes, and it was quite funny at the time because the photographer kept saying, "Go back a bit, go back a bit," and she was standing on the rocks, and my son, basically her husband, is like, "Don't go back any further," because she was pregnant at the time.
Oh my God, that's
We
even
didn't know.
clear.
So that
Thank
was,
you for this lovely signed copy for our club.
yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, so yeah, so a lot of the books I have self-published, going back to the publishing, and I must say Mazoon are absolutely amazing. They've been very good because with Mazoon you get a number of hours with the graphic designer. So you
Mm.
sit there and go through it, and you decide on the font and the print and the this and the that and the photographs and the, you know. And I've done other books, like I did the Tazen at 10. You know, the Tazen the school. They asked me to write the 10-year when they've been open 10 years. They wanted to have a book to commemorate that, and I think there were about 500 photographs in that book. But I had to interview, you know, 4 US ambassadors and all the committee that set the school up, etc. And so, yeah, the graphic designer down at Mazoon has been very, very helpful to me. I think I've published about 8 books there now. I think so. And also, they've been very helpful because we've also published the collections of stories from our writing competition. So we've done about 5 books of those, which I'll also share with you in a minute if you want. Do you want me
Yeah.
to? Shall I just finish the ones that I've published, which are my own? Um,
Yes.
yeah, this one, Sariya and the Turtles. Sariya is my granddaughter, and we went
Yes.
to Rashad on a trip to go and see the turtles. So afterwards, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to put that in a story? And also
Yeah.
because it's amazing here in Oman, we have like 5 of the 7 species of sea turtles.
Yeah.
There's 7 sea species of turtle
Mm.
in the whole world, and we have 5 of them here.
Yeah.
And so at the back of on the front, the first part is definitely again just a fictional story. And in fact, again, I got children from the Sultan School to to do the
Do the
pictures.
demonstration. Yeah.
Children this time. The children were actually, it was a little boy and a little girl. They
Yeah.
were about 11 years old. They had to work to a brief. They had a deadline. They had to work together. It was a very good experience for them and wonderful for them to see their work published. Yeah, those are the kids. That's exactly right. And then at the back of the book, you know, I've tried to make it a little bit uh, interesting.
Info.
Well, about the predators of the sea turtle, but also about Oman. I mean, sorry, humans, if you like, being the worst in terms of rubbish and plastic on beaches
Yeah.
and in the sea. And then
Yeah.
at the back, I have pictures and information, quick factual information about turtles. So it can be read at different levels, different age
Yes.
groups can read it
It's
without
entertaining for a little kid as well as informative for slightly older kids. So
yeah.
very
And
interesting.
the same with this one, and this is another one of my grandchildren, and his name is Raifi, and he's obsessed with dinosaurs. And I
I
found that there were dinosaur bones found here in Al Hood. And so I went to the Natural History Museum and saw them. And
wow.
my lovely mate, Dolphin, who works, Armandri, who works with us at Let's Read, she very kindly agreed to translate the book. So the book is in Arabic and English, which is great. And that's little Raifi there.
Yeah.
And then I've got some factual information about dinosaurs at the back of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my latest. But as I was saying to you, Nisha, I've got one more grandchild, another grandson, Fabian, who's
Yes.
just 2. So I have to now think of a story about little Xavian, and it should
Hmm.
be about an animal that lives in Oman. So
Yeah.
watch this
Sure,
space. I have
it's
to think
already
about that.
done. We asked for suggestions in the
Yeah.
IG live.
Anyone has any ideas on a good story? It could be. I thought about the Arabian leopard or the oryx. I don't
Let's run a
know.
competition on Man Book Lovers Club for this, if you don't mind.
That's a good idea. Yeah, because I also need an illustrator because it's better to have someone else do the illustrations. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we can let's run a we can do something to get
Yeah,
some
I hope so. Mhm.
right. Would you like to read an extract from one of your books? Maybe a passage or a couple of lines that you might like to.
Okay. Well, I was going to read one little poem. I thought that might be the easiest one to do. I just did the poem. It's called Home. The sunny meadow meets the horizon, and alone I breathe life's energy. The broad-leafed tree, in a double helix, nurtured from above and below, living, evolving, dying. I touch the rough bark, I feel the vital earth's power rise through my soles, filling my being with light and consciousness. An ancient garden wall of stone and flint before my eyes, searching calmly for entry into spiritual fulfillment. I have the combination lock. I am the last piece to this strange puzzle, the key to self-realization. Inside, I wander through the growing body of knowledge, inhaling the fragrance of enlightenment. Peace runs through me as a flowing river, with glistening clarity. I immerse my soul in it, in the invigorating coolness of understanding. A well of compassion and empathy slowly tapped, rising up from the inner depths of my being. I sit in tranquility, waiting, aware, my senses finely tuned to receive this moment. No sound heralds the arrival of my guide, but a smile spreads from my lips to my heart as I acknowledge that faith has arrived. As we embrace and I reach my belonging at last, I celebrate my homecoming with joy.
Wow, lovely.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Beautiful. Before I go to my next question, I want to take a question from the audience.
Mhm.
Uh, where we asked, Love in the time of Zanzibar, how did you capture the words of fear, anxiety, and how did you manage to capture the moments of 90th and 20th century?
How did I capture the words of fear and anxiety? Well, the thing is, there was, I think one of the problems with living at that time was the lack of knowledge or the lack of, communication. I mean, people didn't know what was happening one side of the world and the other. And, there were um, a lot of problems at that time.
Hmm.
I'm thinking of slavery. I'm thinking of, um, human trafficking and all that sort of thing. But then also, um, for example, we didn't have the health care and things like contraception. There were a lot of things that we lived in blissful ignorance in those days. But you could catch a common childhood illness and die very easily. In fact, unfortunately, you still can. But in rural areas in some parts of the world. But generally speaking, we take for granted things like health, things like even transport. I mean, for example, when Selma was traveling, what happened was she went from Zanzibar to Aden, Yemen, and then she took a boat all the way around to Marseille. And then from Marseille, I was thinking, well, how did she get to Hamburg, which is like more than 1,000 kilometers,
Mm.
right up in the north of Germany? How did she get there? There wasn't a train, or at least there wasn't one train. She probably took a lot of horses and carriages, and she would have had to wait here and wait there with her husband. Um, and, when she got there, how on earth did she cope? I mean, it's difficult enough for all of us coming to live in Oman now
Mm.
because you have to adapt to a completely different way of
Yeah.
life, really. Climatic, linguistic, cultural, religious. You've lost. I'm a counsellor, so I see a lot of training spouses. They come here and they feel a sense of loss because they've lost their way of life, their status, their friends, their family,
Yeah.
everything. But then you see it as an opportunity and a
Mm.
chance to grow and develop different parts of your personality. But for her, for Salma, arriving in Hamburg, she was probably the only foreigner for a start. That must have been very difficult to feel. There is no sense of belonging. I mean, that's one of the greatest things, urges that everyone has,
Mm.
to feel that there is a sense of belonging. And I think
Yeah.
she didn't have that. And it must have been freezing cold for her. She would have been used to hundreds. She lived in a palace with 1,000 people. She would have been used to lots of servants. And suddenly she was there on her own with 3 kids. And then guess what was the worst thing that could have happened was her husband went to work. He came home, jumped off one of those horse-drawn trams,
Mm.
tripped, went under the
Mm.
wheel and died.
Mm.
So she was left alone in Hamburg with 3 small children and no money in 1888. Oh, well,
Mm.
1866. She left in 1866. She wrote her book in 1888. But you just can't imagine how difficult it must have been. So, yeah, that's what I was imagining. How would it have been in those days?
Yeah.
Must have been difficult. Does
It's
that answer the question? I don't know if it does.
I mean, I don't know what to say to that because life has really changed and evolved so much, and it's happened every year, every day. So yeah, I mean, what we see in our span of lifetime and what has happened before us, it's very difficult to imagine. So yes. So
Yeah, let me say that, like, within 3 days, the same amount of
yeah,
written material is written in 3 days that was written in thousands of years before.
yeah,
It's
true.
incredible. And what will our grandchildren see?
Yeah, true.
It's incredible what's happening technology
I'm
wise.
forgetting the name. I'm forgetting the name of, but there's a theory that every year the world is progressing as much as the previous 64 years. I'm really forgetting the name of the person who gave this theory.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah,
That is really
yeah,
incredible what our
yeah,
children are going to see. And I think, it's like, in a way, sometimes you think it's life imitating art because we've had all these science fiction films with laser guns and space travel, and, it's all like just out of someone's head.
yeah,
But if you
yeah.
can't imagine it, then it doesn't actually. But look, these things are real. These things happen,
Yeah.
and
That
you know,
movies that have come maybe 40 years ago are happening now. The movies that have come out, or books in movies and books that have come out 20 years ago are kind of happening in the foreseeable future.
yeah,
So I keep thinking about that too. We're already living in the future of the sci-fi movies that we, saw or the books that we
true, it's true. Yeah,
read.
that's
So
like you say. I think it was Einstein who said, if you want intelligent children, develop their imagination, and if you want to develop their imagination, read to them, because reading develops the imagination, and I think that's what
yeah,
people forget is so important. Because if you can imagine something,
true, true,
it can
true.
happen. You know,
True.
it's a thought, word, and deed. It starts in your head, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
anything can happen.
So,
It is a,
um, on that note, what kind of books do you like to read? And do you think your writing gets inspired by what you read?
um, well, I mean, there's so many brilliant writers, and I just wish I had, an ounce of their talent. But yes, I mean, I suppose, when you read great authors like, I don't know, Margaret Atwood, at the moment I'm reading this fabulous series of books by Lucinda Riley, the Irish writer, sadly died. But it's called The Seven Sisters, and well, it will be seven books. It's six books, I think, at the moment. Um, and each book has a sort of a basis of historical fact about it.
Hmm.
So you're learning something about a certain part of the world or
Yeah.
certain people from the past
Yeah.
at the same time as, following the character on this journey. So I love that. I love the mix of, because, I think life is stranger than fiction. I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many amazing things and so many amazing people in the world and in history. So I love to read about what really happened, and but then mixing it into a story so that it becomes more easy. Because when we were growing up and we did history lessons, and they were so boring. It was just a book, and you had to read about the Tudors and Stuarts.
Yeah.
Honestly, now there's so much amazing information and fantastic books about, I don't know, Henry VIII, and fantastic films, of course. But I do think it's
Hmm.
important to read the story first because, with the films, it's all done for you, isn't it? You don't have you can be very passive
Exactly.
when you're watching something.
Exactly.
But when you read, you have to use your imagination. You have to
Exactly.
you know, put the dots together. And I think that's what's great about reading. And unfortunately, a lot of our kids are just watching telly and not actually, you know.
Yeah.
But there again,
Ex-
there are some great filmmakers. And so, okay, they're watching cartoons, but someone's made those cartoons. So I suppose it's a bit like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Watching something is quicker entertainment, more stimulating, but the joy of reading is you are the director, you are the producer, you are the actor, you are everything, the music
Exactly.
maker.
You do it all. Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
And I think for that reason, I haven't been able to kind of develop the taste for audiobooks because while it's a hot topic of discussion in most book groups, some of the people even say that audiobooks is not even the same as reading, which personally I agree. I'm sorry, but because I feel it's a step between a movie and a book, because if somebody is reading it out to you, they are emoting, they are expressing, so it is
Yeah.
halfway movie. So I personally don't enjoy audiobooks that much for the same reason.
I must admit, I haven't got into audiobooks, Anisha. But then when I used to read to my children, I mean, I remember my son crying when I was reading Jane Eyre. I mean, I do think, you know, reading to your children is really, really important.
Mm.
Um, but as an adult, I mean, it depends. See, I'm a visual learner. I have to see it
Yeah.
written down. I have to take notes if I'm in a, I have to write it down. I have to see it if I want
Mm.
to remember it. And then, of course, I might not remember it anyway. But
Mm.
audio, but I do love listening to the radio. Just more
Yeah.
recently, I just put my
Yes.
headphones on and listen to
Radio
talk
is people
radio,
talking to you. It's not
LBC.
reading out the book.
Yeah, yeah, no, but
Yeah.
yes, you're right. But maybe, if my eyesight fails, I will definitely get into that. So that's great because
Yeah.
we didn't, a lot of people didn't have that.
Yeah.
It's interesting in our recent writing competition, one
Hmm.
little girl wrote her essay in Braille. She wrote about, was writing about friendship this year, and she wrote it in Braille. And then her
Wow.
teacher from the School for Blind, she translated it into Arabic and then submitted it to us. And she was a winner. So that was great. to see her win.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's really amazing and inclusive, I would say. Yeah.
Well, we try to be inclusive because there's a lot of kids out there who do have disabilities, and I don't know if you're
Yeah.
allowed to use disabilities anymore. But anyway, yes. So that was yeah. I mean, it must be so difficult when one of your senses has been taken away. I
Yeah.
suppose if you've never had it, you don't miss it. But a lot of these kids and adults, of course, it's not like that. It's just happened really, for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting off topic. I always do.
Any
Should,
conversation is great conversation. So, one of the last questions is about your writing process. How do you build a story? While we have talked about it in bits and pieces, but if you would like to add something, including any advice for aspiring authors, we have a couple of questions on that line from our audience too. But tell us briefly about how you have managed to build stories. Do you build the character first? Like you said, you build the character first, and then the story happens. And then, how does the story come to you? Or yeah,
well, I mean, obviously with the poetry, that's different. That's just something as a stream of consciousness. I write it down whenever it occurs to me, and I write that usually by hand. Somehow I can't write poetry on the computer. So that's the first thing. Obviously, if I'm writing uh, completely fictitious characters, what I try to do is, obviously you've got to organize your novel in terms of you should kind of know what will happen,
yeah,
between middle and an end, and there should be the story arc, and you should have this, these, you know, um, obstacles, if you like, to
yeah,
the heroine or the hero of the story or the actually reaching their goal. So there's got to be some antagonistic features, if you like, in your story which stop the
yeah,
person from getting what they want. And that's so you've got to kind of work out a storyline.
yeah,
But the most important thing to me is like working on a character or working on those central characters to your story. And of course, you
yeah,
can have sub stories and things. But because then that character leads the way because you think, well, what would she do in that situation? What situation would she get herself into? So
hmm,
what I was told actually by I've done a few writing workshops and things with different authors, and I think the thing is to know your main character
hmm,
so well. You know when they were born, their date of birth, what they like to eat,
yeah,
everything, where they live, who their family is. You have to really develop it. And so I
yeah,
spent a lot of time developing those characters, the important characters, and
hmm,
and then you kind of let it go from there. But that's certainly the way I work. It's not the way all authors work, that's for sure.
yeah, of course,
Every author is different, but I do think it's also quite important. I mean, I know there are some authors who, they get up at 5 in the morning, they're, sitting down at 6 and they work till midnight or something. I couldn't do that. That's not me, but I do think you have to have a discipline.
hmm,
If I mean, I'm a project-based person. I like to have a project and I like to finish it. So I like to feel that I'm, allowing myself or discipline myself to do 1 or 2 hours a day. Depends. I mean, if you're working, it's very difficult to find the time. If you've got a young family, it's very difficult to find the time. Of course, what's great is if you can go away. I mean, my daughter-in-law has written a book,
oh
um,
wow,
Roshni Goyeti, and yeah, she writes poetry. She's written Four Brown Girls That Write with 3 other writers. And what she often does is she goes for a writing retreat with her co-authors, poets, and they actually go off and brainstorm and have all sorts of stimulating walks in the forest and whatever. And that often really gets the creative juices flowing. So I
it's
think,
lovely.
yeah, if you can afford to do that, or if you can go on a writing workshop, there's some amazing ones around the world. Then it's,
Yeah.
it's good if you can do that.
So this is a question from somebody. in our followers, Rosario, she had asked me this long back last year when we were just launching our live chats. I was just checking our conversation today, and I would really like you to answer this because this she has asked us almost a year, almost 9, 10 months ago. Any advice for someone who is trying to publish her own written and illustrated children's book in Oman?
Well, yeah, I mean, my advice would be you need an editor. You definitely need someone to edit your book because you kind of get too close to it to really be able to see it objectively. Um,
Yeah.
I do work as an editor sometimes, so I have edited people's books. So that's very important to get it edited. I mean, you could send it off to one of these, like the literary agents, where they will assess it, and that I think costs something like £50. I can't remember how much. It depends now. But of course, a lot of publishing houses have really suffered because, of course, books have gone through quite a lot of problems, or publishers have gone through a lot of problems. So you probably could, but if you want to do it here, then my advice would be to actually, um, go to a
Hmm.
publisher here. There's Al Roya, I know of. There's a few others depending on the genre of your book, and then if you want it in Arabic as well or whatever, and then
Yeah.
yeah, you need to sort of you do need advice. You do need someone else to look at it. You can't just you could just go and do it if you want to do it like that, but I think and as I say, for me, it's been better to actually, because I'm a control freak, I suppose. I like to control the whole process, which has meant that I had to pay for it out of my own pocket. But
Yeah.
then you sell it, and you sell it. You go to the shops and check that it's in the shops. I mean, you can give it to book distributors
Yeah.
to distribute, but very often the shops will have they run out, but they haven't told the book distributor that there aren't any more books. So you run around a lot. You have to do the
Right.
leg in Oman, but then there's good
Yeah.
opportunities as well. So because there aren't so
Yeah.
many.
Yeah.
The big fish in little ponds. So there aren't that many. It's not like if you're in London or something where. But then in
That's
London,
true.
there's lots and lots of publishing houses, so it
Yes.
just depends really
It's a
where you are.
smaller playing field with the less available options, but also less
Yeah,
competition. So that's, I think, what you're trying to say.
exactly, exactly. But then you could go to Lebanon or India or somewhere like that and publish at much cheaper rate, or China even.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
then
There
it just depends
there
if
are
you can
authors
have
I
those
know.
access to that, you can.
Yeah, yeah. There are quite a few authors who are living in Oman who I know whose books have got published in India and they just get the cartons back here and distribute them themselves. Yeah,
Yes, and
yeah,
if you do that, I mean, I did at one point. What I always do if I get a book published here, I always ask for the CD of the book, and then it's all formatted on the CD. So then,
Hmm.
if you want it on Kindle, which I have done, which obviously means then, if it's on Amazon, then it's not just on the bookshelf for 6 months. It's on there forever. So and
Hmm.
then you're marketing it to the world. So get
Yeah.
it on the CD so that you can definitely do that. Or what I've done is I've gone to England and I published one in England, and then when I came here, I went to Mizoom and I said, give me 500 copies.
Hmm.
So so there, because you don't want to carry 500 copies of a book in your
Yeah.
suitcase. It's heavy.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
That's true. But yeah, I mean, well, there are various options, of course, but at least a couple of them I know who have printed it in India, and the cargo also from India isn't that
yeah,
expensive. So you don't
yeah,
even
yeah,
have to be an Indian to just contact an Indian publisher and do it online.
yeah, true.
So yeah. Okay, next, just I think this is one of the last questions we'll take before we close. What is your favorite genre of books that you read?
Well, I think I would say historical fiction. I love
Yeah.
historical fiction. I love something which is based on something that really happened, true life, but weaving a story around it,
Yeah.
fictitious characters around that wildlife event, something that really did happen. I think I just love that. I really love that. I wanted to just very quickly show you some of the books from our writing competition because, um,
Yes.
yeah, these were the ancestors of these children
Yeah.
who were the winners. Um,
Yes. I have met
and,
a few of the children.
yeah, and then we did this book, which was where children had to write about their favourite place in Oman. This
Hmm.
one we asked children to write, take a traditional tale and change it in some way, twist the story, change the
Wow.
end, the setting, change the
Hmm.
era, something
Yeah.
like that. Then this one was stories from Oman. So people wrote um, funny stories about things happening in the souk, or
Hmm.
some of them, what we actually asked them to children to
Hmm.
research their ancestors if there were any traditional tales. So that was
Hmm.
good. And then this one, we actually did this one in Arabic as well, which is children from all over Oman who live in Oman,
Yeah.
uh, from all over the world who live in Oman, sorry. They wrote about their hometown, but they couldn't just write,
Hmm.
about, a particular town and take it off the internet. They had to say what made it special to them. Was someone born there? That was something happened there? What made it really special? Because I have to have a word about plagiarism because there is some. I do find with the writing competition sometimes that comes up where children have actually just copied chunks from the internet, and it's just not a good idea because if you do that in an exam, you will be, you won't pass. So try to have your own creative thoughts. And I have had
Yeah.
to talk to some kids about that, unfortunately. But it's so easy, isn't it? Just click and copy and paste and then send it in. So yeah,
That's
unfortunately.
hello from Sana and her mother. I think one of your competition winners. We met all together at Let's Read.
Yeah.
One interesting observation from Avida. I have observed that you have a very composed character. Do you think that is an important quality an author should possess?
A composed character, what, me personally, or you mean one of my characters from the book?
I think she's talking about you because she's talking about it as an author. Do you get a quality? This is an important quality an author should possess. So,
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it depends again on what sort of book you're writing. I do think you've got to be disciplined. I do think you've got to be organised. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I look at that. I've written so many different genres in a way, and that's not
yeah,
necessarily the thing because if you stick to, like, if you love crime writing, you write crime novels, eventually you're going to get very good at it. I mean, let's face it, the first book you write is not necessarily going to be very good. Maybe none of them will be, but the thing is, it's you making your contribution. You find out what you're good at, and then you
yeah,
share it with the world. Whether it's good or not, it's not the question. The thing is, it's you putting it out there. Following your passion and making it happen. And it's like I've heard people say, "Oh, well, I'm never going to be Picasso, so then I'm not going to do any painting." So, well, it doesn't matter. You are unique. You are who
hmm,
you are, and what
yeah,
you write is not going to be the same as anyone else's. So, you
yeah.
know, that's very important that you have believe in yourself, and also know that you're going to fail lots of times, but practice makes perfect. I'm still practicing.
What's up next? What can we look forward to? Any storybook in the pipeline or anything new that you're working on?
Well, I have been writing about a doctor who his he became the doctor with precision for uh, Sultan Qaboos's mother and Sultan Qaboos at one point as well. He was a royal physician, and he came here in 1950. 5, and hundreds of photographs, and he kept diaries of his life. He was in a small clinic in the middle of nowhere, and he had a very interesting history in life, and throughout that very golden era of Sultan Qaboos, so and before Sultan Qaboos, so a very very interesting book that is about to be published. So I helped his son, Dr. Akbar, write that, and showing my age hopefully will come out soon. And then, as I say, I've got to write a story from my third grandchild.
Yeah.
So I guess that's
So
also
non-fiction, memoir, fiction, and a children's book, everything coming up. So all categories just can be looking forward to them and be excited. Amazing. Amazing. So it's time to announce our giveaway winner. On WhatsApp, I have sent you the list of participants, and as we said, the author will choose the winner. So please
Yeah.
just check WhatsApp, and you will get the list.
Well, the stupid thing is that I've gone and left my phone in the other room because I moved rooms. Or I'm going to have to go in the other room to get it. Is that
Uh,
or do you want to announce it?
I can just talk about the yeah. I can just talk in the meanwhile, and you can get it.
All right, just because we moved room, I've left my phone in the other room.
Do you have the email on the laptop where you're logged in?
I guess.
Have your email here?
Yeah. Do you want me to go to my email? Yeah, you can.
Yes, yes. I'll send you on the email.
Okay.
The Let's Read email ID, right?
Yeah, let's read them on.
Sent. In the meanwhile, I'll take the messages, remaining messages from the audience. Thank you, Ms. Jaffer and Anisha, from this wonderful live chat. Thank you, Rukia, for a very kind comment. Looking forward to your next books. Thank you, Jane, for your insight. That's Nuza. Thank you, Ms. Jaffer, for taking the time to speak about your journey and for your brilliant and generous guidance. Thank you, Anisha, for hosting yet another great session. Thank you so much, Nuza. Really kind of you.
I'm not getting.
We are excited to get the giveaway winner's name.
Adults Dreamer 92. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's the. Yes, we can announce it clearly. Yes.
Okay. So yes, Paint Puddles and Dreamer 92.
Yay! Thank you. So I think Paint Puddles is for the copy of Raifi's Amazing Dinosaur Adventure. The winner is Paint Puddles. And for a copy of Love in the Time of Zanzibar, it's the Dreamer 92.
Very good. Now it seems I've lost you. I can't see. Where are you? Oh my goodness.
That's all right. I can see you. So
can you still see me? Okay, well that's all right. I can't see you, but for some reason I can't.
I can see you. I can see you. I think you must have changed tabs. So it's been really wonderful talking to you, Jane, and I really can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us. Wishing you all the best for all the wonderful things you do.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it so much. And yeah, thank you very much, Anisha, for organizing everything and for giving me this platform and this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's really Thank you so much for your time. It's an honor. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for the season finale today and each episode of season two. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jane. Bye bye.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for joining us to season two. Work on season three has already begun and is in process. The authors are already in touch, but it's time to take a little break, and we will come back to launch our season three very soon. Very excited to bring you authors from across the globe, popular authors, um, favorite authors, and do reach out to us through DM if you have someone on your wish list. If you would like us to bring any of your favorite authors to the next seasons of life. Thank you so much, everyone, to each episode, and thank you for all the encouragement and support. All happy reading to all the book lovers out there. Good night, take care, bye bye, and see you soon.